In the small town of Maplewood, most days passed quietly. People knew each other, greeted one another with friendly smiles, and lived their lives in a simple, calm way. But there was one thing everyone in town loved to talk about: Helen's old, rusty 1955 Cadillac. The car was a strange sight in Maplewood. It was faded blue with peeling paint, dents on its doors, and the engine often made loud, clunky noises that echoed through the quiet streets. The tires looked worn out, and the windows had scratches from years of use. Many in town thought the car was broken beyond repair. Some even called it an eyesore. Every day, the Cadillac made its slow way through town, driven by Helen, a quiet woman in her late 60s. Helen had lived in Maplewood all her life. She was known for her kind heart, but the car she drove became the town's joke. When Helen drove past, people would whisper, point, and sometimes even laugh. "Why does Helen still drive that old car? It looks like it's falling apart," said Mary the baker to her friends one morning. "It must be so embarrassing for her," said Tom, a young man who worked at the gas station. Even children in the town school would giggle when they saw the Cadillac rattle by. "Look, it's the rusty car again," they'd say. Helen noticed all this, but she never said a word. She didn't care what people thought about her car. To her, the Cadillac was special. It was not just a car. It was a memory, a connection to a time long gone, and a reminder of someone she loved very much. Helen's house was at the edge of town, on a quiet street with big oak trees. The house was old but clean and welcoming. Every morning, Helen would wash the car carefully, trying to keep it as neat as she could. Despite its rust and dents, the Cadillac was important to her. She spoke to it softly, as if it could hear her. On one chilly autumn morning, Helen was getting ready to leave for the market. She stepped outside, wearing her warm coat and a soft scarf. The Cadillac was waiting, looking tired but still proud. Helen opened the door, got in, and turned the key. The engine coughed and coughed, then finally roared to life. She smiled to herself. As she drove through the town's main street, people stopped and stared. Some shook their heads, others whispered. Helen ignored them all. She knew her car had a story no one else in Maplewood understood. Years ago, Helen had been a young woman full of dreams. She had met Robert, a gentle man with kind eyes and a brave heart. Robert loved the Cadillac too. It had been his car before it became Helen's. Together, they had spent many happy days driving through the countryside, laughing and making plans for the future. Robert was a man who had served his country. He had come back from war, carrying both scars and hope. He dreamed of making Maplewood a better place for everyone. And the Cadillac was part of those dreams. It was a symbol of freedom, love, and hope for a bright future. But life was not easy. Robert passed away too soon, leaving Helen alone with memories and the old car. The Cadillac became her way to keep him close. It was a reminder of love and the dreams they had shared. She never sold it, never gave up on it, even when people told her to. One day, a group of teenagers was standing near the town square. They saw Helen's Cadillac come slowly down the road, and one of them shouted, "There it is, the rusty dinosaur!" Laughter followed, and some of the teens threw empty cans near the car as it passed. Helen's face remained calm, but inside a quiet sadness grew. She wished people could see the car like she did, not as something old and useless, but as something full of memories and meaning. Helen's best friend, Clara, often told her, "Don't listen to them, Helen. They don't understand. Your car is special because of your story." Helen nodded. She knew Clara was right, but it was hard not to feel hurt sometimes. She wished she could share the story behind the car, but the town never asked. One afternoon, Helen sat on her porch looking at the Cadillac parked in her driveway. The sun was setting, and the orange light made the rusty blue shine softly. She ran her hand over the faded paint and whispered, "I miss you, Robert." Just then, a new face appeared in town, a young man named Lincoln. He had moved to Maplewood to start fresh after leaving a big city job. Lincoln was curious and kind, and he noticed Helen's car immediately. The next morning, Lincoln stopped by the diner where Helen often had her coffee. He saw her struggling to start the Cadillac again. Without hesitation, he walked over and said, "Hey, need some help with that?" Helen looked surprised but nodded. Together, they opened the hood and checked the engine. Lincoln was patient and careful. Slowly, the car started to rumble. "Thanks," Helen said quietly. "Not many people want to help with this old thing." Lincoln smiled. "Sometimes the things that look old have the best stories." Helen looked at him thoughtfully. For the first time in a long while, she felt someone might understand. That day, as the Cadillac slowly made its way through town, Helen felt a small hope growing inside her. Maybe, just maybe, people would stop mocking the car. Maybe they would listen to the stories it held. For now, Helen decided to keep driving. Keep holding on to her memories. And maybe in time she would share the real story of her rusty 1955 Cadillac. How it was more than just a car. It was a piece of her heart, and it carried a secret that could change everything. Lincoln had arrived in Maplewood just a week ago. He was quiet and thoughtful, with dark hair and bright eyes full of curiosity. Moving from a big city to a small town was a big change for him, but he liked the peaceful life. He wanted to start over, find new friends, and maybe even make a difference in this little town. On his second day in Maplewood, Lincoln noticed Helen's rusty Cadillac again. This time it was parked outside the town's old diner. Helen was sitting inside sipping her coffee, watching the rain fall softly on the window. The car looked tired but proud, just like its owner. Lincoln felt something strange when he saw the car. It was not just an old vehicle to him. It seemed like a piece of history, carrying memories and stories. He wanted to know more. He stepped inside the diner and sat at the counter. When Helen came in to order a second cup of coffee, Lincoln decided to speak. "That's quite a car you have," he said gently. Helen looked surprised but smiled. "Yes, it is. It has been with me for a long time." Lincoln nodded. "I'm Lincoln. I just moved here." "Helen," she said, shaking his hand softly. Her voice was warm but quiet. Lincoln glanced outside at the Cadillac. "I saw you struggling to start it once. If you ever need help, I'd be happy to try." Helen looked at him carefully. No one had offered to help before. Usually people just laughed or ignored her car. "Thank you," she said. "That's very kind." Over the next few days, Lincoln and Helen began to talk more. Lincoln asked gentle questions about the car, and Helen slowly shared small pieces of the story behind it. She spoke about Robert, her husband, and how the Cadillac was more than just a car. It was a memory of love and hope. Lincoln listened closely. He could see the pain and pride in Helen's eyes. It was clear that the car held something very special. One afternoon, Lincoln asked, "Why don't you fix it or sell it? Maybe get a new car?" Helen shook her head. "This car is not about money or looks. It carries the dreams Robert and I had. It reminds me of him. I can't just let it go." Lincoln smiled softly. Sometimes the things that seem broken hold the most value. Helen felt a little comforted by his words. She had been carrying her memories alone for so long. One chilly morning, Lincoln decided to help Helen with the Cadillac. He brought some tools and spent a few hours cleaning and fixing small parts of the engine. Helen watched quietly, surprised by his care and patience. "Thank you for helping," Helen said when the car started smoothly. Lincoln shrugged. "I like old things. They have stories, and I like stories." Helen looked at him and said, "Would you like to see something?" She went inside her house and returned with a small worn box. "This is Robert's." Lincoln's eyes grew wide with interest as Helen opened the box. Inside were old letters, photographs, and small keepsakes. Helen carefully took out a letter. "Robert wrote these many years ago. He was a brave man, and he dreamed of helping our town." Lincoln sat down beside her, eager to hear more. Helen continued, "These letters tell stories of hope and plans he had for Maplewood. He wanted to make this town a better place, a home where people could be happy." Lincoln was amazed. "Why didn't anyone know about this?" Helen sighed. "Because after Robert passed, I kept these memories to myself. The town changed, and people forgot the dreams we had." Lincoln looked at Helen with respect. "Maybe it's time to share these stories. Maybe the town needs to hear them." Helen smiled, but there was a hint of worry in her eyes. "I don't know if they will listen. They only see my car and laugh." Lincoln placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Sometimes it only takes one person to listen. Then others will follow." That evening, Helen and Lincoln sat on the porch reading the letters by the soft glow of a lamp. Each letter spoke of Robert's plans to restore the community center, create a small library, and start programs for young people. He believed in Maplewood and wanted to bring new life to it. As the night grew darker, Helen felt a spark of hope. For the first time in years, she imagined a future where Robert's dreams could come true. The next morning, Lincoln had an idea. Helen, what if we show the town some of Robert's letters? Maybe share his plans with everyone. Helen hesitated. I'm afraid. People might still mock the car and ignore the message. Lincoln smiled. Let me help you. We can invite people to a meeting at the community hall. Tell them the real story. The story behind the rusty Cadillac. Helen looked at Lincoln with a mixture of hope and fear. All right, let's try. Word spread quickly. When Helen and Lincoln announced a small gathering at the community hall, many townspeople were curious. Some still whispered about the car, but others wanted to know what was happening. On the day of the meeting, the hall was filled with faces, young and old, curious and doubtful. Helen stood in front holding Robert's letters carefully. She began to speak, her voice steady but soft. This car, the rusty Cadillac, is more than just an old vehicle. It holds the memory of a man who loved this town and dreamed of its future. His name was Robert, my husband. He wanted to help us all. Helen read some of the letters aloud. The crowd listened quietly, surprised by the stories of hope and kindness. Slowly, the laughter and whispers began to fade. The people saw Helen and her car differently. After the meeting, an older man named George approached Helen. I'm sorry we mocked your car, he said. I never knew Robert, but now I see how much he cared. Others nodded, and a few even offered to help restore the community center just as Robert had planned. Helen felt tears in her eyes. The rusty Cadillac was no longer a joke. It was a symbol of love, hope, and the dreams that could bring a town back to life. That night, as Helen parked the Cadillac in her driveway, she smiled. The car was still old and rusty, but now it carried a new meaning. It was a reminder that even when things look broken, there is always a story worth hearing. And with Lincoln's friendship and the town's new hope, Helen believed that Robert's dream was just beginning. After the meeting at the community hall, Helen felt lighter than she had in years. For the first time, the people of Maplewood saw the rusty Cadillac not just as an old broken car, but as a symbol of hope, love, and dreams waiting to be fulfilled. The warm words from the townsfolk touched Helen's heart deeply. She knew there was still much to do, but she was not alone anymore. Lincoln visited Helen regularly now. They talked about Robert's plans and how to bring them to life. One rainy afternoon, as the two of them sat by the fireplace in Helen's cozy living room, Helen reached under her chair and pulled out a small, dust-covered box. I want to show you something, she said, her voice soft. She opened the box carefully and took out a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. Lincoln leaned closer, curious. This letter, Helen explained, is from Robert. I found it hidden inside the car beneath the front seat many years ago. But I never had the courage to read it all. Until now. She unfolded the paper slowly and began to read aloud. My dear Helen, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer here with you. I want you to know that I have left something very important for our town, something that can help everyone if we work together. In the old library, behind the shelves in the history section, there is a small safe. Inside, you will find plans and funds to restore the community center and help the people of Maplewood. Please, Helen, find it and use it wisely. This is my last wish. Helen's hands trembled slightly as she finished reading. I never knew about the safe. Robert never told me directly. Maybe he wanted me to discover it when the time was right. Lincoln looked up, eyes wide. This changes everything. If we find that safe, we could really help the town. We could make Robert's dream come true. Helen nodded, feeling a mixture of hope and nervousness. But the library is old and dusty. It hasn't been used much in years. And no one knows about the safe. Lincoln smiled confidently. That's okay. We'll figure it out together. The next morning, the rain had stopped and a soft sun shone through the clouds. Helen and Lincoln made their way to Maplewood's old library. The building was small and quiet, with thick wooden doors and tall windows covered in dust. Inside, the air smelled of old books and forgotten stories. Helen's heart beat fast as she walked past the empty shelves. This place had been important to Robert, and now it was about to reveal its secrets. They carefully examined the history section, looking behind shelves and checking for anything unusual. After a while, Lincoln noticed a faint outline on the wooden panel behind a row of dusty books. Look here, he said. This panel looks different. Helen pressed gently, and to their surprise, the panel moved slightly, revealing a small hidden compartment. Inside was a heavy metal safe. old but still locked tight. Helen's hands shook as she touched it. "Do you think you can open it?" Helen asked. Lincoln took out a small set of tools he had brought just in case. "I'll try." "Don't worry." Minutes felt like hours as Lincoln worked carefully. Finally, with a soft click, the safe door creaked open. Inside, they found bundles of old papers, blueprints, and several envelopes filled with money. Helen gasped. "This is what Robert promised." She pulled out the blueprints first. They were detailed plans for the community center, a place where children could learn, adults could gather, and the whole town could come together. Next, she opened an envelope and counted the money. It was enough to start the project, maybe even more. Lincoln smiled. Robert was prepared. He really cared about this town. Helen felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I can't believe this. After all these years, his dream is still alive." They carefully carried the papers and money back to Helen's house. As word spread about their discovery, more people in Maplewood became interested. The town began to change. At first, some were skeptical. They had laughed at Helen's car for so long. They found it hard to believe that such a treasure had been hidden all along. But as Helen and Lincoln shared the letters and plans, the town started to listen. One evening, Helen and Lincoln gathered a group of townspeople at the community hall. The room buzzed with excitement and curiosity. Helen stood before them, holding the blueprints. "This is Robert's vision for Maplewood," she said. "He wanted a place where everyone could come together, a center for learning, friendship, and hope." The crowd nodded, some wiping tears from their eyes. The old community center had been closed for years, and many missed having a place to meet and share. "We have the plans and the funds," Helen continued. "Now we need your help to make this dream real." People began to talk, offering their time, skills, and support. Slowly but surely, the town came alive with new energy. Helen's rusty Cadillac became a symbol of the town's new beginning. The car, once mocked and ignored, now stood proudly in front of the community hall as a reminder of the past and a promise for the future. Children ran past it on their way to after-school programs. Adults gathered nearby to plan new events. The town had found hope again. One afternoon, as Helen sat on her porch, Lincoln came by with a small gift, a shiny new keychain for the Cadillac, shaped like a tiny car. "It's a small token," he said with a smile, "to remind us that even old things can shine again." Helen laughed softly and took the keychain. "Thank you, Lincoln. You have brought light back into my life." Lincoln looked at her warmly. "And you have taught me that some stories are worth fighting for." That night, as Helen looked at the stars from her porch, she felt peaceful. The rusty Cadillac sat quietly in the driveway, no longer just a forgotten old car, but a treasure chest of memories, dreams, and hope. She whispered softly to the night, "Thank you, Robert. We will make your dream come true." And somewhere in the silence, it felt as if Robert's spirit smiled back. The discovery of the hidden safe in the old library was a turning point for Helen, Lincoln, and the town of Maplewood. The plans and funds inside were more than just papers and money. They were a key to the town's future. But as the days passed, Helen and Lincoln realized that bringing Robert's dream to life would not be easy. The community center was in bad shape. Years of neglect had left it broken, with cracked walls, missing windows, and a roof that leaked whenever it rained. The building stood silent, a ghost of the past. Yet it was also a symbol of hope, waiting to be restored. Helen and Lincoln visited the center every morning, making plans and talking to neighbors. Slowly, the townspeople began to come together. Farmers offered their tools, teachers promised to help with classes, and builders said they would volunteer to fix the building. The spirit of community was growing. One day, as Helen and Lincoln walked through the dusty rooms of the center, Lincoln stopped suddenly. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a small crack in the wall. Helen crouched down and found a loose brick. She gently pulled it out and saw something hidden behind it, a small folded piece of paper. With trembling hands, she unfolded the note. It was old and fragile, but the writing was clear. "To those who find this town holds more than buildings and streets. It holds a secret, a story of the people who built it and the dreams they carried. This note is a reminder. Never forget where you come from, and always believe in the power of hope." Helen's eyes filled with tears. Robert was right. "There's something special about this town." Lincoln nodded. "And now we have a chance to honor that." Word of the note spread quickly. The town gathered in the community hall to hear Helen and Lincoln's story. The room was filled with excitement and pride. For the first time in years, people talked about their history and what they wanted for the future. Helen looked around and saw faces she had never noticed before. Young people eager to help, older residents willing to share stories, and even those who had once mocked her rusty Cadillac now standing beside her. One of the elders, Mr. Johnson, spoke up. "This town has been through hard times, but it has never lost its heart. Robert's dream reminds us all that we are stronger together." The crowd clapped, and Helen felt a warmth she had missed for a long time. The work on the community center began the next day. Helen and Lincoln led the effort. Each morning, the townspeople arrived with tools, paint, and hope. The sound of hammers and laughter filled the air. The old building slowly came back to life. Helen's Cadillac was parked outside the center every day. It had become a symbol of the project, a reminder that even something old and forgotten could shine again. One afternoon, as Helen painted a wall, a young girl named Sarah approached her. "Why do you keep the old car?" Sarah asked curiously. Helen smiled gently. "Because it carries memories and dreams. Sometimes things that look broken can still be very important." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "I want to help fix the building too." Helen's heart swelled. "Thank you, Sarah. We need all the help we can get." As the days passed, the town began to change. The community center became a place of hope, where children learned new skills, adults shared stories, and neighbors became friends. Lincoln and Helen worked side by side, growing closer with each passing day. They shared laughter, stories, and dreams for the future. One evening, after a long day of work, Lincoln turned to Helen. "You know, I never expected to find a place like this or a friend like you," he said softly. Helen smiled. "Neither did I. Sometimes life surprises us in the best ways, but not everyone in town was happy with the changes. A few people still doubted the project and whispered that it was a waste of time and money. Helen heard the rumors and felt discouraged. One night, as she sat by the fire, Lincoln sat beside her. "Don't let the doubts stop you," he said gently. "Robert believed in this town, and so do you. That's enough." Helen looked into his eyes and felt renewed strength. "You're right. We can't give up now." The next day, Helen organized a town meeting to share the progress. The room was full of energy and hope. She spoke with passion about Robert's dream and the future of Maplewood. At the end of the meeting, Mr. Johnson surprised everyone by standing and speaking. "I have something to share," he said. He pulled out an old photograph showing the community center when it was new, filled with happy faces and bright days. "This building was once the heart of Maplewood," he said. "With your hard work and Robert's dream, it will be again." The crowd cheered, and Helen felt tears of joy. Weeks turned into months. The community center slowly transformed from a broken building into a place full of light and life. The children's laughter returned. The walls were painted bright colors and the garden bloomed with flowers. Helen's rusty Cadillac, now cleaned and polished, shone in the sunlight. It was no longer just an old car. It was a symbol of hope and the power of never giving up. The town of Maplewood had changed, but it was only the beginning. With Robert's dream guiding them and the strength of their community, the future looked brighter than ever. That night, as Helen looked out her window at the glowing community center, she whispered to herself, "Thank you, Robert. Your dream is alive." And in the quiet town of Maplewood, a new chapter had begun. The community center had become the heart of Maplewood once again. The long days of hard work were paying off, and the town was buzzing with excitement. Children laughed in the new playroom. Adults gathered in bright classrooms, and neighbors met in cozy common spaces. Helen's rusty Cadillac, now polished and shining, stood proudly outside like a quiet guardian of their progress. The town had planned a big celebration to mark the reopening of the community center. Banners hung in the streets, and the smell of fresh flowers and baked goods filled the air. Everyone was invited, from the youngest children to the oldest residents. Helen and Lincoln worked side by side to prepare for the event. Helen was nervous but happy. After all the struggles and doubts, this was a moment of triumph, a time to show the town's strength and the power of dreams. On the day of the celebration, the sun shone brightly. People gathered around the community center, smiling and greeting each other warmly. The mayor was there, along with teachers, parents, and many others who had helped make the dream come true. Helen stood near her Cadillac, watching as children played in the garden and neighbors chatted. She felt proud and grateful. The journey had been long and sometimes hard, but the town was alive again. Lincoln joined her, carrying a small box. "Look what I found," he said, handing her a wooden plaque engraved with the words, "The Robert and Helen Dream Center, where hope lives." Helen smiled through tears. "It's perfect." The mayor stepped forward to speak. "Today we celebrate not only a building, but the spirit of Maplewood. Thanks to Helen, Lincoln, and the memory of Robert, this community has been reborn." The crowd applauded, and Helen felt the love and support surround her. As the celebration went on, people shared stories about Robert and Helen's journey. They talked about the rusty Cadillac and how it had become a symbol of hope. The car that once was mocked now inspired everyone. But amid the joy, Helen noticed a few faces she hadn't seen at the meetings or workdays. Some townspeople still looked doubtful or distant. Change was not easy for everyone. After the festivities, Lincoln pulled Helen aside. "Not everyone is happy," he said quietly. "Some people don't believe this will last. They think it's just a moment," Helen sighed. "I know, but dreams take time. We have to be patient and keep working." Lincoln nodded. "We will, together." The weeks after the celebration brought new challenges. The town faced financial problems. Some promised help didn't come, and the cost of repairs grew higher than expected. Helen worried about the future. One evening, as she sat in her living room, Lincoln called with urgent news. "Helen, the bank says we need more money to finish the project. They want proof that the town can support it." Helen's heart sank. "How will we do that?" Lincoln thought for a moment. "We need to show the town's commitment. If we can get more people involved and maybe hold events to raise funds, we might convince the bank." Helen smiled weakly. "Let's try." The next day, Helen and Lincoln started organizing small events to bring the town together again. They held bake sales, community cleanups, and family game nights. Slowly, more people joined. Even those who had been doubtful began to see the value of the community center. Parents brought their children, neighbors shared food, and volunteers helped with repairs. Helen's rusty Cadillac was at every event, a steady reminder of how far they had come. One afternoon, while organizing books for the library section in the center, Helen found a letter from Robert she had not seen before. It read, "Dear Helen, if you are reading this, it means the dream is still alive. Remember, even when the road is hard, the heart must stay strong. Trust in the people and in the power of hope. Together you can do anything." Helen felt tears in her eyes. She showed the letter to Lincoln. "This is what we need to remember," she said. "No matter the challenges, hope and faith will guide us." Lincoln smiled. Robert's words are true, and we're not alone. One night, as the community center was quiet, Helen and Lincoln sat together in the newly finished garden. "Do you think we will make it?" Helen asked softly. Lincoln took her hand gently. "I believe in this town, and I believe in you." Helen looked at him, feeling a new strength inside. "We've come so far. We can't stop now." The following weeks were filled with hard work and determination. Slowly but surely, the town raised the funds needed. The bank was impressed by the community's support and agreed to help with the final repairs. Helen and Lincoln felt the weight of worry lift. The dream was becoming reality. Finally, the day came when the community center was fully restored. The doors opened wide to welcome everyone. Helen stood at the entrance, her heart full. The town had come together in a way she never imagined. Lincoln stood beside her, smiling. "This is just the beginning," he said. Helen nodded. A new beginning for Maplewood. As the sun set, Helen looked at her rusty Cadillac parked nearby. It was more than a car now. It was a symbol of love, hope, and the power of never giving up. The town had changed, and so had she, and somewhere deep inside, Helen knew Robert's dream would live forever. The sun rose gently over Maplewood, casting a warm golden light on the newly restored community center. Birds sang in the trees, and a soft breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. Helen stood quietly near the entrance, looking at the place that had become so much more than just a building. It was the heart of her town. Lincoln arrived shortly after, carrying a small box wrapped with a ribbon. "Good morning, Helen," he said with a smile. "Good morning, Lincoln. I'm glad you're here," she replied, her eyes shining with hope. Today was a special day. The community center would officially open for the first time in many years. The whole town was invited to celebrate, and Helen could feel the excitement in the air. The front doors swung open and people began to arrive, their faces full of joy and pride. Children ran toward the new playground, their laughter filling the air. Adults gathered in the bright rooms, sharing stories and plans. The old library was full of books and sunlight, and the garden outside bloomed with colors. Helen watched as neighbors greeted one another and friends reunited. It was more than she had ever hoped for. Lincoln stepped forward to speak. Today we celebrate a dream, Robert's dream, and the power of a community that never gave up. Helen added, "This center is for all of us. A place where we can learn, grow, and support each other. A place where hope lives." The crowd applauded warmly. After the speeches, Helen took Lincoln's hand and led him outside. There, near the shining, rusty Cadillac, stood a plaque that read, "In memory of Robert, a man who believed in dreams, hope, and the power of community." Helen smiled. "Robert's dream has come true," Lincoln nodded. "And it's just the beginning." As the celebration continued, Helen noticed a young boy staring at the Cadillac. He looked curious but shy. Helen walked over and knelt beside him. "Do you like the car?" she asked gently. The boy nodded. "It looks old, but it's special," Helen smiled. "It is. Sometimes things that look old or broken have the most important stories." The boy's eyes widened. "Like magic?" Helen laughed softly. "Maybe a little magic, but mostly it's about believing in what's possible." The boy's mother joined them and thanked Helen. "This community center means so much to us. My son has already made new friends here." Helen's heart swelled. That's what Robert wanted, to bring people together. Later that evening, after the last guests had left, Helen and Lincoln sat quietly on the porch. The stars twinkled above and the world felt peaceful. "Do you remember when I first brought the Cadillac into town?" Helen asked. Lincoln chuckled. "How could I forget? Everyone laughed at that rusty old car." Helen smiled. "And now it's a symbol of hope." Lincoln looked at her warmly. "Just like you," Helen blushed. "Thank you, Lincoln, for everything." They sat in silence for a moment, feeling the strength of their friendship and the future ahead. The next morning, Helen received a letter. It was from the mayor, thanking her for her dedication and courage. But inside the letter was something else, a small key. Helen's eyes sparkled as she read the note attached. "This key is to the first room in the community center, the Robert Room, where his story and the history of Maplewood will be kept forever. Thank you for reminding us all what hope can do." Helen felt tears of joy. She called Lincoln immediately. "This is wonderful," she said. "We have a place to honor Robert and the town's history." Lincoln smiled. "It's perfect. The past, present, and future all together." Helen and Lincoln worked to create the Robert Room, filling it with photos, letters, and memories of the people who built Maplewood. The rusty Cadillac was featured in the center, reminding visitors of the journey and the dreams that started it all. School children visited often, learning about the town's history and the power of community. The room became a place of inspiration and hope. Months passed and the community center thrived. New programs began, after-school tutoring, art classes, gardening clubs, and family events. The town was alive with activity and friendship. Helen and Lincoln grew closer, their bond deepening with each passing day. Together, they dreamed of new ways to help their community grow and flourish. One quiet evening, Helen stood beside her Cadillac watching the sunset. She thought about how much had changed, from being mocked and lonely to being part of something greater. A soft voice beside her said, "You did this. Helen, you brought hope back." She looked at Lincoln, smiling. "We did it together." Lincoln took her hand gently. "And we will keep doing it. For the town, for Robert's dream, and for all of us." Helen felt a warmth in her heart. This is just the beginning of a beautiful story. The rusty Cadillac, once a symbol of neglect, had become a symbol of love, hope, and the power of never giving up. And in the small town of Maplewood, dreams continued to grow one day at a time.